Tonight's talk is going to be about the question of the week, which is what defines you? And this is a very important question for us to ask ourselves on a regular basis, and also to consider the idea of defining ourselves in general in the first place. So I'm not really going to deal with this as much tonight, but why do we define ourselves? Why do we let other people define us? And this whole exploration of what defines us is huge, because it gets at the nature of what it is to be a human being and what it is to move beyond our normal human experience. But I'm going to begin in a kind of practical level, in the practical realm of what we usually think of as what defines us. And a lot of times this is all caught up in how other people see us and how other people define us. So oftentimes this goes back to physical appearance, right? How do you define yourself as kind of like the way that you are outwardly perceived by other people. I am a white man, hetero, vanilla, just couldn't be more interesting or less interesting. There are lots of people who really take pride in the way that they look and in a way that is different from other people, and more power to you. I don't have a tattoo on my body. I know I've got a lot of students that do, and that can really be a part of how we see ourselves. I'm a tattoo person, or I'm a short hair person, or I'm a long hair person, or I'm a man bun person. I'm not a man bun person. That's just my COVID haircut. But this is an interesting thing, because if we are choosing our appearance, or we're choosing part of our appearance, obviously a lot of it is way out of our control, this is usually meant to be an outward manifestation of how we see ourselves to be inside. And oftentimes this is the way that we communicate to the world how we see ourselves. And we hope that other people take that and see what we want them to see, and it doesn't always happen. And let's be real, there are a lot of people who are defining other people in the world by the way that they look in a way that is very unhelpful, and a way that really causes us to be stuck in a very real, very limiting way in our society and the world. So let's be careful with how we do that. Other people define us by our personality, by our traits, by the way that we act and what we are doing outside in the world, maybe by our jobs. There are all kinds of ways that other people might see us and define us. And I think the most important thing about this part of the conversation is for us to be weary of letting other people define us, because we want to take power over this. We want to be able to choose how we see ourselves, and it would be really nice if we could choose how other people see us, although that's not always easy and it's not always possible. But we want to be aware of how we are perceived, and aware that there is always this conversation going on between us and the world. And unless we are going to be a hermit and just lock ourselves away like we probably should be doing right now with COVID raging, you're probably not going to do that for the rest of your life. And if that's true, and if you're out here in society and in the world, there is always this interaction between you and the way that other people see you. And if we're trying to be able to impact the world, and we're trying to be able to have the kind of effect that we want, a big part of this, in a sometimes limiting or sometimes empowering way, is the way that people see us. So don't get too caught up in how people see you, but recognize the effect that that's having on any kind of message and any kind of impact that we're trying to have in the world. So that is usually on the most surface, superficial level, is how other people are seeing us. Then we get a little bit deeper, and it's how we define ourselves. So I was telling the kids earlier in class today, before starting martial arts, I was a different person. And one of my major ways that I defined myself was I didn't think of myself as being lazy, but I think on some level it's like I knew that that was what it was. The word lazy wasn't what I kept saying to myself, because then I probably would have done something. But I was just more interested in things that were easy. I'd rather sit and watch TV than, do homework or anything else like that. And then I decided, when I started practicing martial arts, I realized, like, I get to change who I am, and I get to be who I want to be and be the way that I want to be. And I started, really pouring myself into my practice and enjoying the process of trying something, being terrible at it, working hard, and eventually improving on it. So when I was able to do that in martial arts, that started to enter every part of my life. And then I went from a C or D student to a straight A student, and was able to do the things that I was doing in martial arts elsewhere in life. That started by me choosing to define myself in a different way from how I was defined, and even in a different way from how other people saw me. And this is hugely powerful and hugely important. So we have a tendency to be very tribal as human beings, and we define ourselves in large part according to what groups we belong to. And if we are choosing a really great group to belong to, that can have a really positive impact on our lives. For example, those of us who really see a big part of who we are is being in the dojo and being a martial artist and being part of this group of people who are really, heading in the right direction, trying to better ourselves. I think this is hugely powerful. And we see ourselves as belonging to all kinds of groups. The election is over. The tribal experience in our country is not quite died down to the degree that I think we all hoped it would. But, half the country sees themselves as being red, and the other half sees themselves as being blue, and half of them, see themselves as being, a victim of what has happened recently, or, a decent chunk of people, and half of the people see themselves as being triumphant and like, that's right, my team won. Recognize that wherever you put yourself in a tribe, it usually is by definition in opposition to some other tribe. And oftentimes when we place ourselves into these groups, we start to see ourselves in that way, as being in opposition to other people in other groups. And this is something that goes way back into our history and evolution. And it serves a purpose, obviously, to keep us safe, and we like being around people who we see as being like ourselves. And there's a lot of good to that, but there's also a lot of bad to it, and we see it in the world today. So if we take that idea of defining ourselves as being part of a group, we can start to get into the next part of this conversation, which is the way that we are defined, or the way that we define ourselves, can be it can either make us small, it can be limiting, or it can make us big, it can make us expansive. And it's very clear to see how this would work in a group setting. If we see ourselves as being part of something that's bigger than ourselves, that has an expansive feel to it. You see yourself as part of the dojo, you see yourselves as part of martial arts, that makes you bigger than yourself. You're a part of something that is, kind of part of who you want to be. And maybe you see yourself as part of a church, or you see yourself as part of a group of people that volunteer, and you're really connecting to something that's bigger and more important to yourself. This is a great way, as I've said in the past, to get beyond the ego, at least for a moment, and when we place our attention on and our effort in the direction of some other cause, we are pouring our energy and ourself into that allows us to transcend the small self. And it can have the opposite effect, right? So let's say you say, I define myself as a Republican, or I define myself as a Democrat. Well, that, of course, you're part of a big group of people, and you might feel really good about that, but you're also limiting yourself, and you're saying, like, well, that means that I believe this way, or I vote this way, or, this is what I do, and this is always what I do. Now, obviously, people don't always vote straight down the ticket, or always believe in every single part of whatever group they see themselves as being a part of, but you can see how this can have a limiting effect on us as well. So we want to be careful with the way that our definitions, the way that we define ourselves or that other people define us, we want to be very careful with the way that this limits us. Because there is a part of the human experience that is limitless. There's a part of what we are able to experience in life that has no real definition, that is beyond all comparison and judgment and all of that. And if we are really attached to these ways that we are defined, we are really attaching to the ego. Leah was asking me about this the other night. It's like when we're doing this, it's almost like we're solidifying the ego. We're really, what we do is we kind of add more stuff onto who we think we are. And if you are adding more stuff onto yourself, you're thinking like, I'm this person, I'm that person, I'm in this group, I'm on that group. It can seem expansive, but think of the effect that it has on you. It often can feel like it's weighing you down. It feels like you're piling more and more and more stuff on top of what would otherwise be just a very pure and expansive experience. So this is what it feels like to be attached. This is what it feels like to solidify the ego. We're weighing ourselves down. We're becoming more and more stuck in this vision of ourselves. And this is, as I say all the time, this is something that we really want to be able to move beyond attachment, and be able to then be free in the moment to see all the possibilities before us, every possible way of being, every possible action. And this is a very different way of experiencing life and experiencing any moment. So those are, I'm kind of sliding now into the next part of the conversation, which is about looking at the way that we are defined on a more metaphysical level, on a spiritual level, a cosmic level. And I'll read a tiny part of one of my favorite books. It's called The Book on the Taboo Against Knowing Who You Are by Alan Watts. If you haven't listened to Alan Watts, shame on you. Go straight out after this talk and read something. So this is my favorite part of this book. I've only read this book once, but I've read this page about 100 times. He says, God also likes to play hide and seek, but because there is nothing outside God, he has no one but himself to play with. But he gets over this difficulty by pretending that he is not himself. This is his way of hiding from himself. He pretends that he is you and I and all the people in the world, all the animals, all the plants, all the rocks, and all the stars. In this way, he has strange and wonderful adventures, some of which are terrible and frightening. But these are just like bad dreams, for when he wakes up, they will disappear. Now, when God plays hide and pretends that he is you and I, he does it so well that it takes him a long time to remember where and how he hid himself. But that's the whole fun of it. Just what he wanted to do. He doesn't want to find himself too quickly, for that would spoil the game. That is why it's so difficult for you and me to find out that we are God in disguise, pretending not to be himself. But when the game has gone on long enough, all of us will wake up, stop pretending, and remember that we are all one single self, the God who is all that there is and who lives forever and ever. So, I really like this way of thinking of enlightenment and thinking about this conversation regarding the ego and what is beyond it as this is kind of what my concept of God is. I don't necessarily jive with the traditional Western or kind of Christian ideal of God, which is what I was raised with. But I like the idea of this, all of beingness, everything is being God. And what we are, when we are in this little fragile human experience of being kind of crammed into the ego, and we see ourselves as being separate from everybody else, that's just God playing hide and seek. That's just a game. It's an illusion. It's pretend. When we see ourselves as being separate from other people and separate from the earth and the universe and all of that, this is a game. And it can be something that we have fun with. Of course, we have beautiful and terrifying adventures, and this is what life is. It is an entertainment. It is super interesting, and other times less interesting. But that's what it is. We want to be able to see ourselves in that way, and this is a very different way of being defined, or of defining ourselves from what I think most people do. We see like what we see in the mirror, or we see the way that we experience ourselves compared to other people, separate from them. We have our emotional state. This is us. This is how we feel. This is me. These are my thoughts. And we compare ourselves to other people. And it is very difficult to not do that, because this is what we've been doing since we were born. Well, since we were taught in some way, I guess, to do this. And we want to free ourselves from that whenever possible. We want to practice that in meditation and recognize that the small definition of human being, even though that includes a ton of people in the world. How many people are there now? 7, 8 billion people? There's a ton of people. It's big. There's a lot of people who are human, but that is still a tiny sliver, an imperceptibly tiny sliver of what existence is and what is actually out there for us to recognize we are connected to and we are a part of. So what is that? If we even take away the limitation of human, what are we now? We're consciousness, maybe? Energy? I really like this saying from Ueshiba Sensei. He said that our goal as a martial artist, or our goal just as human beings, is to connect and merge our individual ki, which is the chi or the life force. You can also think of it as being consciousness, with the universal ki. And this is something that we cannot think our way through. You can understand on a logical, intellectual level. Of course, if I break myself down to the smallest pieces, that I'm just the same as everything else in the universe. But there's a very big difference between understanding that on an intellectual or logical level and being able to experience it. And this is what we try to do with our practice. And thinking of it in terms of energy. You know, every time we breathe in, we take in energy. Every time we eat, we take in energy. And every time we move or we breathe out, or, you know, whatever else we do with the food, that's expelling energy. And this is always happening, and we can understand on a scientific level how that works, but we can also feel. Just take a deep breath right now. Just close your eyes and breathe in and feel all that energy rushing into your body, and then breathe out and feel yourself giving that energy back up. And the more we're able to focus on the breath, the more we are able to allow our consciousness and our awareness to be absorbed by that universal energy, that oneness. And if we can feel every breath like that, then we're able to constantly go back to that throughout our day. It's a beautiful thing. I said this the other night at the end of Tai Chi, and some people seem to really like it, so I guess I'll say it again. This is related to what I was saying before about feeling like we add more and more onto ourselves and we get weighed down. If we look at a sculptor who is trying to create a beautiful piece of art, they usually don't take a piece of marble and add more marble onto it, right? You take a big chunk of marble and you get to the beauty beneath it by chipping away and getting rid of all of the excess. And through this process, which is oftentimes very long and labor-intensive, you'll end up with perfection. You'll end up with at least the closest thing to perfection that we can get to. And I think, at least for me, the most beautiful, breathtaking art is simple, mimicking nature. It's not trying to do too much. And this is the way that our lives work, right? And the way that we are as human beings. We are the artists of our lives. And we are seeking that purity. We're seeking that purest way of being, or that purest experience of life. It is not arrived at by adding things onto us. It's arrived at by letting go of everything that is extra. And this is what enlightenment is. This is when we actually awaken to our true nature, or our highest self, recognition of ourselves as God, or whatever you believe, or however you want to put that for yourself. It is, what is beyond the darkness of closed eyes, when the ego is shed and we are just left with that oneness. It is purity and it is simplicity. So if you look at, if you get to that point, and let's imagine that you are able to achieve that in any long-lasting way. I was thinking of Michelangelo's David, and I was fortunate enough when I was younger to actually travel to Italy and to see Michelangelo's David in Florence. And first of all, David is huge. He's a massive, so he started as a really big chunk of marble and now is just a really big human-shaped chunk of marble. And I don't think that David travels very often because he's very heavy. But you can think of, like, what if they took David and they're like, we're going to go take him around the world and ship him around to all different kinds of cities and museums and let everybody see him, and it's going to be great. And imagine that every city that he went to, they slapped a sticker on him. They're like, yeah, David was in Rome. David was in London. David did this. David did that. This is kind of what we do with ourselves, right? We take this pure perfection, which is just this totally clean sculpture, or totally clean, egoless nature, and we start adding stuff onto it. We're adding all these stickers, which are all of our attachments, and they get really stuck. And then we look in the mirror and we see all those stickers all over us. We're like, yeah, I did this, I'm that type of person, I think this, I think that. And the messed up part is it only takes one sticker to ruin all of it. If you went to Florence and you sat in line for hours And then you got to the front of the line and you're like, all right, I finally get to see this world famous sculpture. It's so beautiful. And then you get around and you see like right there on the back, somebody just put the sticker. You would be horrified. It's an insult to you personally that you had to see that. And it's funny because in some way, on some level, this is really what we're doing, right? We're taking all of these attachments and we're kind of cluttering ourselves. And we clutter our pure consciousness, we clutter our pure egoless highest self, our true self. And we want to be able to kind of peel these off, maybe just one at a time, but maybe in what feels like just a very quick, deep cleaning, like they just took him and put him in a hot bath and then all those stickers just fell off. This is what we want our meditation to be like. What really should happen is when a sculpture like David travels around, is he doesn't get anything added on to him. He actually kind of in the hustle and bustle and getting moved around, maybe he loses a little bit. Like little chips start to fall off. And just the, being out there in the air and whatever else happens, you start to get a little bit of that really nice clean sheen falls off. And it becomes kind of imperfect in a way, but also more perfect in its own way. So if art gets too perfect and it's like, when you're a baby, there's something that's very perfect about that, but you also don't know anything. And of course it's easy to be egoless because you haven't gone through anything. But when we go through life, then we got all those stickers on us, we want to take them off, but really what we want to end up with is this sense of being seasoned, like a wok or a skillet, where we've taken this on, but it makes us more perfect, and yet there's nothing that we're actually stuck with or attached to. It just adds a little bit of spice to our life. And this is something that you might think of like you could go too far, like Venus de Milo. Her arms just fell off. They moved her too much. We're not necessarily trying to get there, but the process of perfection, the process of becoming that highest self and becoming beyond ego, really should be that very simple process of becoming more simple, of letting go. And the ways that we define ourselves and the ways that other people define ourselves and then we take on and get attached to. All of these things are very seemingly real, seemingly long-lasting or even permanent attachments that we want to be able to just completely let go of. They're not real. And eventually we will find our way back to God, back to that deeper experience. We're going to find ourselves and let go of this adventure and all of its attachments and everything that came with it. And it would be nice if we could do that before we die. So that's what meditation is for. We're going to try to sit and let ourselves experience that purity. Go beyond definition. Go beyond those attachments and just be. Feel with every breath you take in part of the universe and allow yourself to feel part of that. Every breath out, you expel your energy, you expel all of that stale attachment and all of that back out and just allow yourself to be in that pure state. Sit comfortably.